What if your investments could keep up with inflation? Like actually hold their value even when everything else is getting more expensive?
You're talking about a real challenge for a lot of folks.
Yeah, especially these days.
For sure.
So today we're going to dig into a shareholder proposal that's suggesting something pretty radical.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's suggesting that big tech companies should consider holding Bitcoin in their corporate treasuries.
Oh, wow. So, like, instead of just holding cash, they'd be holding Bitcoin.
Exactly.
Interesting.
This is all coming from an article on Cointelegraph from January 10th, 2025.
Okay, I've heard of that site.
Yeah, so it talks about this proposal,
Yeah.
and it specifically focuses on Meta, which used to be Facebook, of course.
Right.
And they're sitting on just billions in cash,
Yeah.
you know.
Oh, yeah. Huge cash reserves.
So this proposal is saying, hey, inflation is eating away at that cash. Why not consider putting some of it into Bitcoin?
Okay, I see where they're going with this.
The proposal claims that Bitcoin is a hedge against inflation, and they even say it's outperformed bonds over the past 5 years.
Interesting, but I think it's important to break down what they mean by a hedge against inflation.
Right. Good point, Dave.
So, Bitcoin has a fixed supply.
Right. 21 million coins. That's it.
Exactly, and that's a big difference from traditional currencies, which governments can print more of whenever they want.
So basically the idea is as demand for Bitcoin goes up
Uh,
and the supply stays the same,
yeah,
the price should theoretically rise.
right, especially during times of high inflation.
So this proposal is arguing that by holding Bitcoin, these companies could actually protect their assets from losing value.
Makes sense in theory, but, Bitcoin is also known for being pretty volatile.
Oh, for sure. It's definitely a roller coaster.
And that's something those companies would have to consider very carefully.
Absolutely. But before we get too deep into the risks, let's talk about Meta's CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, for a second.
Okay.
Because the article mentions this interesting little tidbit. It says he named his goats Bitcoin and Max. Kind of funny, right?
That's pretty wild.
So, of course, it makes you wonder, does Zuck have a personal interest in crypto?
Well, it's hard to say for sure based on that alone,
Right,
but it definitely adds to the intrigue.
for sure. But regardless of Zuck's goats, the bigger picture here is that there's growing institutional interest in Bitcoin.
Yeah, definitely more and more hedge funds and corporations are starting to consider it as a potential investment.
Exactly.
But it's not a guaranteed win. Microsoft shareholders recently voted against a similar proposal.
Oh, yeah. I remember hearing about that.
So it's clear that not everyone is convinced.
So why do you think Microsoft shareholders voted against it?
Well, I think one of the main concerns is Bitcoin's volatility.
It can be pretty wild.
Right, and for a company like Microsoft, that stability is really important.
That makes sense.
Plus, Bitcoin doesn't generate any passive income like bonds or dividend-paying stocks do.
So that's another factor for those companies who are looking for a steady stream of income.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, but this Cointelegraph's article also mentions that the same group who put forward the Microsoft proposal is now targeting Amazon with a similar idea.
So they're not giving up.
Nope, they're persistent.
Interesting. So what are they proposing for Amazon?
They're urging Amazon to allocate at least 1% of their assets to Bitcoin.
Wow. Amazon has massive cash reserves, so even 1% would be a huge amount.
Right, it would definitely be a bold move,
Yeah, and I think it could potentially send shockwaves through the industry.
like a domino effect.
Exactly. If Amazon were to embrace Bitcoin, other companies might be more likely to consider it too.
It would definitely be a signal that Bitcoin is becoming more mainstream.
Absolutely. But of course, Amazon is going to be weighing the potential benefits against the risks.
Right, like any smart company would do.
Exactly. They'll be considering their investment strategy, their outlook on regulations, and of course, public perception.
So many factors to consider.
It's a complex decision for sure.
Yeah, but it's a conversation that more and more companies are having.
And one that we should all be paying attention to,
For sure.
because it could really reshape the financial landscape as we know it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a whole new world for a lot of folks.
And we're all kind of figuring it out as we go.
Exactly, learning the rules of the game while we're playing it.
And the stakes are pretty high.
Oh, for sure. We're talking about people's financial well-being here.
Exactly. And, there's another big piece of this puzzle that we haven't even touched on yet.
What's that?
Government regulation.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Governments around the world are still trying to figure out how to regulate cryptocurrencies.
And their decisions are going to have a huge impact on how companies approach Bitcoin as a treasury asset.
Yeah, for sure. It's a lot of uncertainty.
It is. But you know what they say? Uncertainty breeds opportunity.
Right. So for those who are paying attention and willing to adapt, there could be some real advantages.
Absolutely.
So this isn't just about Bitcoin, is it?
No, it's much bigger than that.
This is about a fundamental shift in the financial landscape.
Yeah, the old ways of doing things just don't apply anymore.
We need to be ready to embrace new ideas and new strategies.
Exactly. It's like we're standing at a crossroads.
Ooh, I like that analogy.
And the path we choose now could determine our financial future.
Powerful stuff. So let's zoom out for a minute.
Okay.
And think about the bigger picture. What are the broader implications of companies holding Bitcoin in their treasuries?
Well, for one thing, it could further legitimize Bitcoin as an asset class.
Uh-huh.
If major corporations like Amazon and Meta start holding Bitcoin, it sends a signal to other businesses and even governments that Bitcoin is a viable and valuable asset.
It's like a domino effect.
Exactly, and that increased acceptance could lead to even more widespread adoption.
Which could drive the price of Bitcoin up even higher.
It's definitely a possibility, but of course that also increases the risk for those companies holding it.
Right, because Bitcoin can be so volatile.
Exactly. So it's a trade-off. Higher potential for gains, but also higher risk.
So it's not as simple as just buying a bunch of Bitcoin and hoping for the best.
No, not at all. It requires a thoughtful and strategic approach.
Companies need to consider their overall financial goals, their risk tolerance, and their understanding of the cryptocurrency market.
Absolutely. It's not a decision to be made lightly.
There's a lot to think about, and honestly, it feels like we're just scratching the surface here.
We are. This is a story that's still being written.
And we're all watching it unfold in real time.
Exactly.
So for our listeners who are trying to make sense of all this, what are some of the key takeaways?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that the financial world is changing rapidly.
It's not your grandpa's stock market anymore.
Exactly. We can't just rely on the old rules. We need to be proactive in educating ourselves and staying informed.
About new trends and technologies.
Right. And another key takeaway is the importance of diversification.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. Spread your investments across different asset classes, including cryptocurrencies.
And finally, don't underestimate the power of shareholder activism.
That's right. We've seen with these proposals that individual investors can have a real impact on how companies operate.
If you believe in something, make your voice heard.
Absolutely. Engage with the companies you invest in, ask questions, and advocate for the changes you want to see. We've talked about a lot, but it feels like every answer just leads to more questions.
It's like we're looking through a kaleidoscope. The patterns keep changing, and there's always something new to see.
And that's what makes this so interesting. It's not just about Bitcoin or even corporate treasuries.
It's about the future of finance.
Exactly.
And how we all need to adapt.
Companies and investors alike.
For sure, we've talked about the potential benefits and risks of Bitcoin as a treasury asset.
Right. But there's another layer we haven't really dug into yet.
Oh, what's that?
The ethical implications.
Okay, that's interesting. Tell me more.
Well, Bitcoin has been praised for its potential to empower individuals, especially in places where people don't have easy access to traditional banks.
Yeah, I've heard that argument.
But there are also concerns about its environmental impact.
Right, the energy use for mining.
Exactly. And then there's the potential for illicit activities.
So it's not all good or all bad?
Definitely not. It's complicated.
And nuances to consider.
Exactly. And for companies thinking about holding Bitcoin, these ethical considerations are really important.
They can't just ignore those aspects.
No, they have to weigh those factors alongside the financial ones.
It's a tough decision.
It is. And ultimately, each company will need to decide what's right for them.
Based on their own values and their risk tolerance.
And their long-term goals.
Right. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
Exactly. And as investors, we also need to think about these ethical implications.
When we're making our own investment choices.
Absolutely. It's all about being informed and making conscious decisions.
Knowledge is power.
Especially in a world that's changing so fast.
Well said. Well, this has been a really thought-provoking conversation.
It has. We've covered so much ground.
From the specifics of this shareholder proposal to the bigger questions about Bitcoin and the future of finance.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
There's so much more to explore.
Absolutely. This is a conversation that's going to continue for a long time.
For sure. So for our listeners who have been with us on this journey, we hope you found it valuable.
It's been a pleasure sharing these ideas with you.
Remember, the world of finance is always evolving.
So stay informed, stay adaptable, and don't be afraid to challenge the status quo.
And, of course, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive.